Welcome to the Mobilized Leaders Podcast with me, James Chavez. I coach people to be confident and competent leaders. So let's jump into today's episode. Well, welcome to episode number 3 of the Mobilized Leaders Podcast. I'm James, and I coach people to be confident and competent leaders. And I hope that you're finding some benefit from being a part of this. I hope you've subscribed and you're along for the ride, because we're getting stronger and better as we unpack these principles and best practices that are going to make each of us better. In episode number 2, we talked about the imposter syndrome. So many leaders find themselves in that rut, and we unpack some tools that are going to help us get out of it and find the true authenticity of the skill set that we have that got us in the position in the first place. Today, I wanted to talk about another pitfall that I find a lot of leaders finding themselves in, and it's called the Disempowerment Trap. Whether you're a young leader just starting out or you're a seasoned leader, you are not impervious to the disempowerment trap. Now, what I've found so often is it's not something that you usually fall into later in your leadership. It's usually something that you succumb to early on in your leadership, and you build this bad habit that stays with you throughout your leadership. Maybe you even get better at it, and you craft ways to really solidify this disempowerment trap that you found yourself in, and you just double down and you own it. So before we kind of unpack ways to combat the disempowerment trap, what I wanted to do is really spend a couple of minutes just talking about what leadership is. What are you sacrificing, and what are you giving up power in? What's leadership? So when you think about leadership, I think of the person that typically gives direction, right? That's somebody that makes sure everyone understands the how to accomplish tasks, and they keep people on task. There's accountability. They're the ones that make sure that you are doing what's expected of you for the task or the initiative that's at hand. Maybe they're the ones that are casting vision to make sure that everyone understands the why, and really helps you envision what can be and what isn't yet. Vision is powerful, and we count on leaders to do that. It's hard to motivate yourself a lot of times. So really, that's a big attribute of leadership. Communication. You depend on your leader and the one in leadership to provide the communication, to answer the questions. They're the ones that are making sure the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. They're the ones that are maybe liaison being between upper management or the C-suite, the top tier leaders in whatever organization and whatever position or tier you find yourself in. You expect them to have integrity in that role, right? You kind of lean on them to be honest and trustworthy, someone that you can trust that has your back. Another big key component, the one that I want to camp around for a minute, is decision making. You count on leaders to be the ones to make the decisions. And a lot of times when leaders are making decisions, that's when they become most vulnerable to the disempowerment trap. I've seen tons of leaders do it, and it's when they pass off responsibility for an unpopular decision that they have to make. Have you ever done that as a leader? Have you had leaders that have done that? I mean, I see it so often. You pass the buck. You're not willing to take responsibility, especially when it's unpopular. If it's a popular decision, of course you're going to own it. You're like, yeah, guys, this was my idea. But if it's one that maybe you're not loving and the team's definitely not loving, I've heard so many leaders say, well, guys, this is just what the boss wants us to do. If it were up to me, I wouldn't. I'm so sorry we have to do this, but you know what? We don't want to get in trouble, so, let's just do what the boss wants. You know how they can be. And everything just keeps kind of moving upward, right? And you're just passing the buck, passing blame upward. But here's what you're doing. You're disempowering yourself, and you're becoming an obstacle rather than a resource. Did you catch that? I want to make sure that you heard what I said. You're becoming an obstacle rather than a resource. As a leader, that's your privilege. You're not just the one that's the boss that gets to tell people what to do. As a leader, it's your privilege to clear the way, remove obstacles, and empower the people on your team that you get to lead to operate within their giftings so that they can be successful. And when you cease to become a resource, you're just an obstacle that needs to be removed. Ouch, that's scary when you think about it. You don't want to be an obstacle, and you certainly don't want to be removed. Have you ever had a leader where you thought, gosh, we succeeded in spite of them, or we had to work around them, or go above them? That's horrible. And as a leader, one of the telltale signs that you have disempowered yourself, you've just become useless middle management, is when the people on your team that you lead always are looking for opportunities to circumvent your leadership and go above you. They're trying to catch your boss at the water cooler and have some conversation. They're trying to make appointments with your boss and leader to get information and direction because they know they're the ones making the decision. They're the ones with the information. They're the ones with the vision. They're the ones that are giving direction. You're just a messenger. And so you've disempowered yourself. You're no longer a leader. You're just an obstacle. You're the one that brings the information, but you're not the one that can make decisions, and you're certainly not the one that can help them. So again, don't fall into that, because when you disempower yourself, your leadership is short-lived at that point. It isn't long before you find yourself replaced. People are going to figure out ways to lead around you. So let's just talk about a couple of strategies that maybe can help. And a lot of them are going to be very common sense, kind of no-brainer strategies, but I think they're worth kind of mentioning and talking about anyway, because again, this is so easy to do. We don't like to be unpopular. And there's a lot of leaders that their personality makeup is more of a people-pleasing. They're a peacemaker. Every leader doesn't have to be a steamroller and just a full-out A-type driving red, all about business, getting things done at any cost. A lot of leaders love people, they love unity, and they love bringing people together to accomplish more than you can apart. That's a great attribute, and those are great leaders to have around you and on your team. And if that's you, you've got a great skill set to be a great leader. But again, don't sacrifice your leadership credibility for the sake of unity and for the sake, not even unity, let me correct myself, because you won't have unity, for the sake of being liked and being a popular leader. So you can have relationship, you can be their friend, but you have to be their leader first. That will cultivate friendship if you're a trustworthy, credible leader. So get them in the right order and you'll be successful. If you try and force one before the other that's not supposed to be there, it's doomed for failure. So strategy number 1, embrace accountability. Own up to the successes and the failures. Seems very common sense, right? Like I didn't even have to say it, but you got to own the decisions. And that's really hard to do, but if you start intentionally, even before something happens, you got to say, you know what? Whether good or bad, come hell or high water, I'm owning this. This is mine. I got placed in leadership. I'm a leader for a reason, and I'm just going to own it. I'm going to embrace accountability. Another one is communicate effectively. Explain your why. That goes back to vision casting. When I talked about an attribute of a leader, vision is a big one, right? It can't be money. It can't be position. Can't be the stick. Sometimes it has to be the carrot. Sometimes you get the privilege of casting vision of what can be. Here's why we're doing this, and here's how your contribution fits into the success of the greater initiative. Maybe they don't see it. And again, if you just give them a task, then you're just going to have worker bees. But your job as a leader is to build up other leaders. That's what great leaders do. They don't just tell people what to do. That's what a manager does. Leaders actually build up other leaders. So cast vision and communicate. Another strategy is seek feedback and learn. Figure out ways. I like to say I do an autopsy, as gruesome as that sounds. Every time we have an initiative, we have an opportunity to evaluate success or failure, you're doing an autopsy. At this point, I can't do a lot about it, but I can learn from it. As I mentioned in the last couple of episodes, I say you got to fail forward. That's a way to combat imposter syndrome. That's a way to combat being disempowering your own leadership, is do a postmortem. Say, all right, let's pause. Let's not jump right into the next task. Let's not bury our head, especially if it's a failure. You might not want to go back and look at it and revisit it and highlight a failure, but you have to. You have to look at it and say, well, what did we do well that we can replicate and build off of? But what did we do poorly? What are these opportunities for improvement that we can either say, hey, this part we're going to commit to never do again. And this is a part that, man, we had the right intentions, but maybe at execution, here's where we kind of lost a little steam. Here's where we can just tweak, maybe redirect, and we can find some wins in our sail, and we can move forward again. But do that postmortem. Seek feedback and learn. Don't blame others. Own the accountability, because every encounter, every success or failure is an opportunity for growth. Another one is focus on solutions. Don't finger point. Look for solutions. Good leaders are solutions-based, not problems-based. It doesn't take any energy or any leadership at all to point out problems. There are problems all around us, and some people have a PhD in problem finding, right? All they do is point out problems. All around me, everywhere a problem. But leaders find solutions. Edison, right, well known for the incandescent light bulb, he failed hundreds of times before he was successful in creating that light bulb. And when interviewed, I love the quote. He said, I didn't fail, whatever it was, 800 and some times. He said, I just found 800 and some ways to not create an incandescent light bulb. He built on the failures to find the success. And that's what you have to do. You have to not finger point, but you have to leverage it as an opportunity to get better and to find solutions. A fifth strategy that I think is really great to employ, and I'm probably going to sound like a broken record because I said it in the last episode. I said it in the first episode. I'm probably going to say it in every episode. But you have to learn from successful leaders. You've got to find mentors, people that you can ask questions to that have really mastered and owned the art of decision making. There are some people who know when they, certain times of the day or certain seasons or days of the week, when they have decision fatigue, when they're going to make poor decisions, when they just can't make any more decisions, or when they're fresh and they can make decisive, strong, accurate decisions. I talked about in the last episode, figuring out ways to get the right information so you can have the highest probability of success to make strong, winning decisions. It's good for you, it's good for your team, and it's good for your leader. So you got to figure out who you can learn from, who has mastered the art of decision making, because that's what it all comes down to. I've heard so many leaders disempower themselves by not embracing this concept. They point the finger up and they say, man, I wouldn't make this. If I were king for a day, I would not do it this way, but we just got to do it. One of the things that I learned early on that I had to do, because I've had to implement things that I didn't love, believe it or not. And I'm sorry if you're one of my leaders listening to this podcast, and I'm hurting your feelings, but it's true. You're not going to love every single thing that your leader asks you to do, nor should you. I mean, it's called work for a reason, and they are the boss. So they get to cast some vision, they get to give direction, and then you, at whatever level you get the privilege to lead at, you implement at whatever you're tasked with implementing. So one of the things that I did, rather than just disempowering myself and saying, the boss wants this, we just got to do it. Hate it, but we got to do it. Maybe I did hate it. Maybe I hated almost all of it. But in everything I've been asked to do, no matter how horrible or senseless it seemed to be, I did the hard work of pausing, and personally, before I went out and talked to the team, I researched something that I could sink my teeth into with said task or initiative. Whether it was only 10%, maybe 90% was complete nonsense. And I thought, why are we doing this? We're doomed for failure. This is ridiculous. But you know what? This 10%, I can build on that. I would do that. I agree with that. That builds on our strength. That makes sense. That's what I'm going to springboard off of. That's what I'm going to lead with when I'm casting vision to the team, when I'm communicating, when I'm casting vision, when I'm giving direction. I'm leaning into that 10%. Maybe it's 20%. Maybe you're lucky enough to agree 90% with initiatives that come down the pipe that you get to implement with your team. Maybe it's 100%, but I don't think so. I have never met a leader who agreed 100% of the time with all of the initiatives that they are asked to lead out in. So what I've learned to do is sink my teeth into that percentage that I do believe in. So then it's honest. You have integrity. That was one of the key components. You have authenticity, and you are leading from a strength, from a true place of believing in it. You've got to own it. That's the key. You've got to own the decision. You ask any leader, you read their book, listen to their podcast, you talk to them, you get mentored directly, you ask some great leaders in your life, they're all going to say you got to own it. If you don't own it, you don't own it. And then somebody else is going to own it, and you've lost control. And again, it's not about control, but as a leader, it's your privilege to steer the ship. And so you have to make sure that you're owning this process. And that's the best way to do it authentically. You've got to figure out ways to sink your teeth into something, lead from that, and before you know it, people are going to buy into your vision. They're going to find different things that resonate with them in the initiative that they can sink their teeth into and they get excited about. They can champion part of the initiative. And then collectively, you have this great strength and momentum. And just like James Collins says in his book, Good to Great, that flywheel, if you've ever read it, you just keep cranking at it. Pretty soon, this natural inertia builds and it has its own momentum. And then this thing's moving with less effort from you. You're not having to force it as hard. that's when the true joys of leadership kick in, and you can really sit back and enjoy what's taking place. So I hope that's helpful for you. I'm trying to make these short, bite-sized, and portable so we can take some principles, we can apply them, we can figure out ways to get better, and then we come back for more. So that's all for this time. Make sure you're subscribing. Check it out on YouTube. Visit mobilized.life if you want to figure out more ways to get connected with me. Follow me on social media, James Chavez, on all the social media platforms, or you can listen on Spotify or Apple Podcast or Stitcher or Pandora or all the places that the podcasts are. But subscribe to your favorite one so you don't miss any episodes as we continue to unpack some of these great leadership principles that are going to make us better. So until next time, apply what we've talked about. Disempower yourself. Stay strong. Feel the empowerment of leadership. Don't fall into this trap, and you'll be a stronger leader as a result. I'll see you next time. I hope you were encouraged and challenged by today's podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our Mobilized YouTube page and follow me on social media at James Chavez on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and James Chavez on Facebook. For more information and ways to connect, visit our website at mobilized.life.